The goal of this talk is to convey to you that the errors of Russia are not the errors of a country confined to its borders, nor are they the errors of a political regime necessarily. They're more fundamental. Communism is guilty of several errors. And though the red style, so the style of Soviet Russia, was a totalitarian dictatorship, though that style is gone, the errors of Russia have spread under new colors. For example, green, environmentalism, rainbow, LGBTQ+, and other colors still. So again, so the colors have changed, the errors remain. Okay? They hide under new innocent-looking and sounding colors and names. That's the goal of this talk, to convey that. Our Lady gave a warning in Fatima about the errors of communism. She said on July the 13th of 1917, "If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the church." At that time, July of 1917, the communist revolution was brewing in Russia. It had not yet happened, it had not yet succeeded, but it was in the making. That would be in and of itself an exciting subject, how the Russian Revolution occurred. Revolutions are not grassroots movements. They're orchestrated by powers that use the populace, but they don't come from the populace. They use a disgruntlement amongst the populace, but they don't come from that disgruntlement. Sadly, we don't have enough time to look into that, but communism was brewing. It would soon happen. In November, Russia would be a communist country. Now, what are these errors of Russia? So let's start kind of coming out of that shell that we want to break out of, that these errors are confined either to one country, and unless somebody's speaking Russian or has a Russian passport, you don't have to worry about him spreading the errors of Russia. No, the errors are not confined to a region or a nationality or a culture or a language. Russia was simply the first country to be totally overtaken by communism. So we're talking here about the errors of communism. Our Lady means the errors of communism. And not errors of style. The style of government was bloody and dictatorial. Not even that. Not even that. Communism can be propagated in very gentle and tolerant manners. It could assume different political forms. Communism is fundamentally a pseudo-philosophy, a pseudo-science, a pseudo-sociology, a pseudo-theology, and lastly, a political system. So the political system is the vehicle for those errors. The philosophical, the sociological, the theological, economic, and scientific errors. So again, the political system is secondary. It could be a totalitarian dictatorship. Those are the ones of the past and sometimes still in the present moment. But for communism to be effective, it doesn't need a dictatorship. It wants a dictatorship. That's the most effective way to govern for communists, but it doesn't have to be that way. For example, East Germany was relatively democratic. In fact, its name was the German Democratic Republic. And in fact, it was far more democratic than the Soviet Union. It was a facade, of course, but it operated in an apparently democratic system. Poland, for example. So these countries had a far more democratic makeup, appearance. And nonetheless, they were thoroughly communist, socialist. The principles were there. So pretty much any political system, even democracy, can be a vehicle for the errors of Russia, the errors of communism, okay? The color, again, doesn't matter. It could be red, could be green, could be rainbow, could be whatever other colors people associate, you know? Could be any color. So St. John Paul II, in May of 1982, a year after his assassination attempt, said, as a commentary to this warning, the warning was given, if what I say is done, if what I say is not done. St. John Paul II sadly comments, how many persons and how many societies, how many Christians have gone in the opposite direction to the one indicated by the message of Fatima? Sin, and Our Lady was deploring sin above all. Stop offending God, he's too much offended. Sin has instead gained such a strong right of citizenship in the world. And the denial of God has spread so widely in human ideologies, conceptions, and programs, even amongst Christians. That's the saddest aspect, even amongst Christians. So definitely, the church and the world have not done what Our Lady asked for. No doubt about it. They have not. How many of you, just don't answer this question, I'll ask it again at the end. How many of you pray the rosary every single day, okay? Just bow your head in shame. And, all right, how many of you pray the rosary every single day? And the errors have spread. The errors have spread. 20 years later, by 1930, so 1917, 1937, Pius XII wrote a beautiful encyclical on the errors of communism. So the teaching of the church had been addressing communism in different documents before then, but the encyclical of Pius XI, Divini Redemptoris, the Divine Redeemer, is a succinct little identification of the main errors of the communist system. And Pius XI says that this modern revolution, the communist revolution, has actually broken out or threatens everywhere. Again, it's not just Soviet Russia, everywhere. There was communist threat in Italy, where the Pope resided, in Spain, in Mexico. 37 is just, we're in the midst of the Spanish Civil War. So it's threatening everywhere at this point, and it exceeds in amplitude and violence anything yet experienced in the preceding persecutions against the church. Entire peoples find themselves in danger of falling back into a barbarism worse than the one which oppressed the greater part of the world at the coming of the Redeemer. Communism is a barbarism worse than the barbarism of the pagan world before the coming of Christ. Worse than the barbarism of the Goths and the Visigoths and the Germanic tribes and the Mongol hordes and the Huns and even the Romans and the Greeks and the Persians, and worse. It's a barbarism far worse than that which the world experienced before the coming of the Redeemer. For the first time in history, we are witnessing a struggle cold-blooded in purpose and mapped out to the last detail between man and all that is God. So it's a quote from Thessalonians. Pius XI says it. So that's the thing about communism. It attacks the divine order of things at its very foundations, either by subverting it or usurping it. Let me explain. So communism is, one, a struggle. So it's a violent struggle. That's what characterizes communism. It's a violent struggle. It's cold-blooded. It admits of no emotion, no empathy, no sympathy. It's got a purpose. It's mapped out to the last detail. So how organized communism is diabolically impressive. Communism can be said to be a brainchild of the Masonry. So again, communism isn't just something that comes from the people. Hey, let's become communist. It's quite clearly a tool in the hands of people with money, resources, influence, power, etc. We'll get there. And it's a struggle between man and all that is God. What does that mean? It's an attack on the divine order of things at its very foundations. The most foundational pillars of the divine order of things are attacked, either by subverting them or usurping them. What does that mean? Subverting means turning upside down. So an example of this, subverting the divine order at its very foundations. God created human beings male and female. He created them. When you subvert that, you say, well, no, that is a sociological imposition. Sexes and two sexes is a binary construct of Western society imposed on society by power structures that have existed until now. We must be rid of that. So subverting it, so that we get rid of that divine distinction into sexes, we subvert it and say now there's countless genders. So that's subversion, you destroy. Or usurping is you don't destroy either because whatever, it's just if you destroy it, then even communism can't function. So communism actually presupposes certain structures being in place so that it can function. So for example, parental rights to have children and to educate their children. It doesn't totally abolish that, subvert it, because you always need a mother and a father to make a child. You might move that into a laboratory, but you always need that. You always need a mother and a father, no matter how. You need that biological matter at the very least, to speak crudely. So usurping it means, however, well, but it's not like a divine order of things. It's not sacred and has to be respected by us. It's human. So if we decide to conceive people in the womb of a mother, okay, that's a concession. If we decide to do it in a laboratory, that's fine. It belongs to us to make that decision. To us, meaning to the state, to the Communist Party, to the governing authority. So you usurp it. Yeah, we can't change it, but it's us. We make the decisions. If we want to make it in a lab, fine. If parents educate their children, why? It's just, well, because it's just, why is it? Because we allow them. We can't get rid of that yet. But at least we're going to usurp it. We say, you get to raise your own kids. Why? Because we said so. It's not because God gave you any natural authority over your kids. It's not because it's a right of yours or a duty, just because we said so. All right? So we usurp it. That's why communism is, again, a cold-blooded struggle between man and all that is God. So there's nothing left of God and his order. Either we get rid of it or we say, it's actually, we created that order. It actually depends on us. We're the authors of it. We're the bosses. We're in charge. And nothing's left. So now finally, the principal errors of communism. Communism makes a lot of mistakes, but the principal errors are the following. And keep in mind that, again, you will find these not just in Soviet Russia, where, like in the scene out of the movies, lines of people walk into a factory as a hammer and sickle is being, it's not, it's just, these principal errors can be present in any political system. Keep that in mind. So first, materialistic atheism, but more, a dialectic, violent, evolutionary materialistic atheism, a class struggle. These errors, again, are pretty simple, but they can be disguised. To understand the insanity of the philosophical principles of communism, we'd have to study a certain Georg Hegel, who was a so-called philosopher of the late 1700s, early 1800s in Germany, and understand his pseudo-philosophy, which is truly insane. It's ideology, and it's a dialectic ideology. What does that mean? We do not have much time to dedicate to this. What it means essentially is that the world is, one, matter, and even spirit is matter in the end. And this world is in a process of constant evolution, and this evolution is dialectic, which means you go from thesis to antithesis to a synthesis. So it's always a triangular motion. Just the world is in motion on its own. And it's in a violent struggle between thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Then the synthesis becomes the new thesis, which has to fight against an antithesis and create a new synthesis. And it keeps going on and on. It's insane. Yes, you're right. If you're thinking this doesn't make sense, it's insane, it's invented, you are right. All of the above. All of the above. But nonetheless, this is the philosophy behind communism. Pius XI. According to this doctrine, there is in the world only one reality, matter, the blind forces of which evolve into plant, animal, and man. Even human society is nothing but a phenomenon and form of matter, evolving in the same way. By a law of inexorable necessity and through a perpetual conflict of forces, matter moves towards the final synthesis of a classless society, in which there's no order, no authority, no hierarchy, no absolute law. In such a doctrine, as is evident, there is no room for the idea of God. There is no difference between matter and spirit, between soul and body, neither survival of the soul after death nor any hope in a future life. Insisting on the dialectical aspect of their materialism, the communists claim that the conflict which carries the world towards its final synthesis can be accelerated by man and must be accelerated by man. So on the human level, there has to be a struggle. So there's the class of those who don't own the means of production. So I don't own a factory, I work in a factory. So I'm the proletariat. I don't own that factory, I work for a guy who owns it. So my whole life is exploitation, working for a guy for whom I create wealth. Okay, that's thesis. Antithesis is those guys, the guys that own the factories and that make money on my work. The goal is a synthesis, a classless society where there's no owners and possessors. Well, there's the utopia, total utopia, which cannot exist, but in their minds they say will exist. But to get to that utopia, there has to be a class struggle. I have to violently battle against the owners, and they're obviously going to violently battle back against me, but I have to defeat them. That's going to happen on its own, the communists say, but I have to accelerate that process. So for example, I have to expropriate the owners by whatever way is possible. By democratic means, if that's sufficient, why shed blood if you can vote them out of existence? Do that. If you can't do that, shed blood. Violence is justified. We need to do this. Right? So that's the dialectic. Yes, it's insane. You can't explain error fundamentally. So this is an error. You can't get to a point where you understand, oh, I know why he made that error. No, error is there's like a gap somewhere in the logic. So error doesn't make sense. So if you're thinking to yourself, this is insane, correct, this is insane. And you can't explain error. If you could, then it wouldn't be an error. It would make sense, all right? Hence, communists endeavor to sharpen the antagonisms which arise between the various classes of society. This could be, again, whites against blacks, blacks against Hispanics, whatever, rich against poor. There has to be an antagonist, there has to be a fueled struggle, because that's how society makes progress. On the other hand, all other forces, whatever they be, as long as they resist such systemic violence, must be annihilated as hostile to the human race. So the church, for example, is always the victim of communist regimes, because it's of course a resistance to this violent class struggle. So that's the first fundamental error, a dialectic, violent, evolutionary class struggle, materialistic atheism. From this follows the second error. If there's no God, there's no hierarchy or no God-given authority. No hierarchy because, again, we're moving towards the goal of a classless society. We'll look at the concept of communist equality in just a second. It's not what you think when you think of equality, not at all. But the second error is there's no hierarchy, no God-given authority, and no absolute moral law, natural or divine. None. So there is no such thing as a divine or natural structure of things. Nobody has authority over anybody else in any circumstance. If that is the case now, that has to be overcome by a violent struggle. Okay, so this includes hierarchy, again, includes the most fundamental hierarchy of husband having authority over wife, husband and wife over children. So even that has to be gone. So again, it attacks the foundations of society at their very foundations. So no hierarchy means no parents over children even. In a classless society, there is none of that. Parents over kids, no such thing. There's an absolute centralization of power, so the state takes the place of God, right? So if you say, there is no hierarchy, there is no God-given authority, there is no absolute moral law, you create a vacuum. So the state naturally takes that power for itself. So it tells you, we're going to have a classless society, we're going to have no absolute moral law, we're going to have no authority, but at the same time, by necessity, but also by subterfuge, the state assumes all those responsibilities. We'll be your God. We shall be your God. You can't live without God, that's true. Human beings can't live without an order. So if you eliminate that, don't worry, we'll be your God. We'll be your God. So there's a classless society, so we'll tell you where you belong in society. There's no God-given authority, so who do I obey? Well, we'll tell you that, don't worry. There's no absolute moral law. What's right and what's wrong? We'll tell you that, don't worry. That violates the principle of subsidiarity, by the way, which is another fundamental error. Pius XI, so now I'm explaining how absolute centralization of power is a fundamentally erroneous principle, contrary to the principle of subsidiarity. Now I'm going to explain that. Pius XI, that most weighty principle which cannot be set aside or changed and remains fixed and unshaken in social philosophy, principle of subsidiarity, defined thusly. Just as it is gravely wrong to take from individuals what they can accomplish by their own initiative and industry and give it to the community, so also it is an injustice and at the same time a grave evil and disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. For every social activity ought, of its very nature, to furnish help to the members of the body social and never destroy and absorb them. So again, God has created us, we're social beings, human beings are social beings, and in society all of us have a role, all of us have a part to play, all of us have a responsibility, an ability and a responsibility that cannot be taken away from us. So if, one, because it's against an intrinsic order of things, written in our very nature, we're social beings, hence written in the nature of society itself. Second, because the consequence of it is it totally enslaves us as human beings. If I am not allowed to take care of myself, my family, my work, my job, my car, but all of that is assumed by some central power that totally stunts my possibility to develop, to become and develop as a human being. So that violates totally the principle of this subsidiarity. All of us just become pawns in the hands of an absolute power. It says, okay, you're gonna vegetate. We don't need you. You're gonna vegetate. You get to sweep. You don't get to do anymore. Yeah, you get to raise your own kids. You get to have kids, but you don't get to raise your own kids. That's the violation of the principle of subsidiarity. You don't get to make these decisions. Well, I want to work. Well, no, you don't need to work. I want to support myself. No, we'll give you the food and the money. No, you don't need to make that decision. I want to take my family on vacation. Next week, not today. Again, fourth, the ends justify the means. So this is a direct corollary to number one. Violence and terrorism are perfectly justified. They're actually good. If we can even speak of good and evil in communism, violence and terrorism are a good thing when they promote a classless society, when they fuel this violent dialectic. So to throw bricks through the window of a store is a good thing if it moves us closer to a classless society. There's nothing wrong with that. To take the property of somebody who has too much of it is a good thing if it's going to move us closer to a classless society. To take kids away from parents is a good thing if it moves us closer to a classless society. All right? All of these are perfectly fine. What matters is the revolution. And lastly, the rejection, obviously, of the sacredness of life, marriage, and the family. So let's keep going. Everybody still okay? Everybody all right? Is anybody here a communist already? Is anybody? I'm trying to convince you that you shouldn't be, just in case anybody, these are errors. Don't subscribe to any of this. So now, life, marriage, and the family. Okay, we have to look at this a little closer. So now we have to look at the concept of absolute equality in communism. Communism says that even human society is nothing but a phenomenon and a form of matter, evolving in the same way. And since family is natural, a natural building block of society, communism hits hardest here. It attacks the family brutally because it's the natural building block of society. That's when human nature expresses itself most fundamentally and places the building blocks of society. That's where communism has to hit the hardest. In fact, Karl Marx, in so many words, said like to make communism function, you have to abolish the family. That's what you have to do. So this absolute equality means the rejection of all God-given authority, including husbands and parents. So that's what they mean by equality. They don't talk about the Christian equality that we are used to. They talk about an obliteration of any relationship of obligation, right, and authority, including husbands, parents, but extending to any structure where there is authority. Boss over laborers, employer over employees, priest over parish, bishop over priest, pope over church, president over nation, governor over state. They say that, but in the end, they have to fill that vacuum. They have to fill that vacuum by saying, well, now there's again, I don't want to jump. They say that, but in the end, it's impossible. So the state, the communist state, takes the place of that vacuum. They become God and take the place of husbands, wives, parents, whatever. So there's no natural rights, no obligations, no nature. There's no human nature, just history and economy. Okay, so there's no human nature, just history and economy. Pius, actually this is Leo the 13th, I believe. It is not true that all have equal rights in society. Wow, you were surprised to hear that. It is not true that there exists no lawful social hierarchy. We don't all have equal rights in society. There are natural inequalities. There are natural inequalities. Men are the heads of society, women are the hearts, starting in the family. The man is and must be the head of a family. If he isn't, if he fails in that, there's going to be problems in that marriage. There's going to be problems in that family. Usually, marital problems arise from that. The man is not the head. He becomes one of the kids, and the wife has to be the head. The wife loses respect for the husband, and then the problems multiply. Women are supposed to be the heart. So women aren't supposed to be the heads. If they try to be the heads, that's going to be conflict in the family. They are the heart. They support the decisions of the head. So the heart makes the organism alive for the carrying out of the decisions of the head. Fathers, mothers, children, these are natural inequalities. Right? So again, we are saying, now this is the Christian statement, we all have equal dignity. So in that sense, there's a perfect equality. We are all human beings in the same way. You have a human nature, I have a human nature. Everybody that's human has a human nature and has an equal dignity. But we don't have all perfectly equal rights in society. I don't get to veto the decisions of Congress. Only the President of the United States of America can do that. I don't get to choose what your kids eat for breakfast. You get to decide that. You don't get to choose which friar is going to sweep the stairs next week in the friary. Here, the guardian of the friary decides that. So you don't have equal rights in this sense. Second, error in the domain of life, marriage, and the family. No private property. This is what we're most familiar with, but we have to understand why communism says there's no private property and why it's so dangerous to abolish private property. Why? Because private property gives autonomy to individuals and families. If you have private property, you have a certain autonomy in regards to the state or to any authority above you. If your family owns property, you have a certain autonomy. And that creates classes, and that cannot be allowed in communism. In communism, society takes priority over individuals and families. Hence, it must take away the fundamental ability of individuals and families to become autonomous. No private property for you. You need a toothbrush, we'll give it to you. You need toothpaste, we'll give it to you. You need a job, we'll find you one. You need a car, we'll give it to you. But if you don't need one, we'll tell you. So in communism, everybody's supposed to work according to contribute and work according to their capabilities and to receive according to their needs. Well, what are your needs? Don't worry, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what your needs are. You'll get as much as you need. You need 2 toothbrushes? Well, no, you don't. You need toothpaste? You don't need it. So again, this is an inequality also, a natural inequality in society in ownership. Some own one object, some own another. You own your car, she doesn't own your car. That's an inequality. You might own 2 vehicles, she might own 3. That's an inequality. Some own more, some own less. Inequality, which creates classes. That's a natural facet of society. Why? Because we are not all totally equal in society. Some have more motivation, they want to have more. Some are less motivated. Some have more talent, more skill, some have less. Some are talented at administering factories and making them produce a lot. Some are talented at working in those factories and making them productive. Same thing with virtue too. Some have more, some have less. There is no absolute equality. Whether in ownership, talent, skill, health, calling from God, etc. Although we all have an equality of nature, a fundamental sameness of nature. And private property, again, is the first safeguard of our autonomy and our dignity, right? Otherwise, we're all, we're all beggars with the state, and what they give us, we take. What they don't give us, we don't have. And our families would be completely dependent. But that's what communism wants, this total dependence. Private property is this is the compendium of the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. It's like a catechism of social doctrine. Under St. John Paul II, it was issued by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace and Justice. Private property is the natural fruit of work and protects human dignity, since it assures a person a highly necessary sphere for the exercise of his personal and family autonomy. God wants us to have that autonomy. That's also the principle of subsidiarity. If I can make money from my own toothbrush, buy my own toothbrush, brush my own teeth, I should do that on my own. I should be allowed to do that on my own. It's not right for a government official to say, here's your toothbrush, open your mouth, okay, I'll be back tomorrow. No, you can't. Thus, it is an essential element of an authentically social and democratic economic policy, and it is the guarantee of a correct social order. That's why communism hit hard here, especially. And how do you expropriate? You can do it in different ways. You can do it like the Soviets, that peasant has a farm. What do? Kill that peasant, take his farm. Easy enough. What does a peasant matter, That's how the Soviets, that's how the Chinese communists did it, that's how they did it in Cuba. Just kill the owner, take his property, right? And then, simple enough. Or you can do it, again, many ways, excessive taxation, for example. You can impose taxes that are so burdensome on individuals that it effectively leaves them no personal property. So yes, you work, but if 70, 80, 90% of your income is taken by the state, because the state will provide everything, you effectively have nothing, and you depend in everything on the state. So you are working, but you're working without enjoying the fruits of your own labor, which is so contradictory, because that's precisely what the communists say. You should enjoy, you should have, again, the wealth that you produce. So it's taken away from the factory owners, but this still doesn't go back to the people. Now it goes to the Communist Party. So excessive taxation. So again, guess what? You don't have to think of a doctor. You don't have to think of paying for your medical bills. We'll pay for all that. Vacation provided, everything, schools, everything is paid for. But then everything is decided for you. Which doctor do you see? Well, we'll take care of that. Where do you go on vacation? We'll take care of that. Where do you send your kids to school? Do you send them to school? We'll take care of all of that. Your taxes have paid for everything. You don't have to worry about anything. Just watch YouTube. So that's one way of expropriating the proprietors. More about marriage, family, and life. So marriage, according to the communists, is a social convention subject to change. There's no human nature, hence there is no natural sexes, there's gender blurring. So marriage is a social convention. Just like, how many players are on a football team? Who knows for sure? 11? 11 on a football team. That's a social convention. Why not 12? Just because we decided that we're going to have a game called football, and each team is going to be made up of 11 players and have a certain number of whatever, substitutes. But that's a social convention. Why not 12? Because we agreed upon it. Why not 10? Because we agreed upon it. Why play according to one set of rules and not another? It's a social convention. Marriage, same thing. Why have two people in marriage and it has to be a man and a woman? It's a social convention. We agreed to it. But it doesn't have to be that way. Why male and female? Because we just happen to agree to it. But it doesn't have to be that way. Gender blurring. Social convention. It's up to us to change it. The emancipation of women. Wow, doesn't that sound exciting? Like, wouldn't you get behind that? Emancipating women? But what does that mean? It means forcing them away from home and their families. Why? Because even if they want to be there, they want to be there because of a social conditioning. Okay? We have to emancipate women. Even if they're happy raising their kids at home, they don't know it, but they're enslaved to the owners, to the proprietors. We have to force them away from home and from their families, freeing them, so to speak, from their obligation to children and family. You introduce contraception, abortion, divorce, gender blurring. Introduce that freedom. To emancipate women. In fact, that's the rhetoric today. These are women's rights. If you go to the Unitarian, I won't even call it a building. I won't even call it a church. The Unitarian building. They have one of those announcement boards on the front where they have their 5 dogmas, and it's just totally communism, and it's just kind of like we'll get to this a little bit, but one of them is that women's rights are human rights, which is of course true, but that's not what they mean. This is what they mean. Contraception, abortion, divorce, gender blurring must be legal. And if you're against that, then you're against women. And because that's an easy platform to ride, oh, you're against contraception? Well, you want to persecute women? You want to put women down? It's not at all. Contraception, abortion, divorce, gender blurring, that's what puts women down. But it's an easy platform, to make leverage on. Says Pius XI, refusing to human life any sacred or spiritual character, such a doctrine logically makes of marriage and the family a purely artificial and civil institution. One man, one woman, all right. One man and one man, fine. One man, one man, one man, fine. Whatever. For life or temporary, whatever. It's subject to change according to the necessities of society, according to the necessities of economy. There exists no matrimonial bond of a juridical moral nature that is not subject to the whim of the individual or of the collectivity, the society. Naturally, therefore, the notion of an indissoluble marriage tie is scouted. Communism is particularly characterized by the rejection of any link that binds woman to the family and the home. You sometimes see those propaganda posters of Red Russia, of women, with huge muscles riding tractors, right? Very proud of emancipating women from the home. Well, that's, again, the red style is gone, but today the same thing has happened. If you get on 140 North, there's a huge billboard, with a woman's face and the question, do you need contraception? No, do you need birth control? Just call this number, we'll provide it, You want to be enslaved? Fine. You want to be the object of lust of men and not pay the consequences? Fine. What does that fuel? That fuels, again, the enslavement of women to the lusts of men. So even men don't have to be responsible with you now. They can just contracept their responsibility away, and so can you. Just be an object of use. Abortion, divorce, gender blurring, all of the above. Emancipation. The same propaganda, same error, used in a democratic system. And through, again, the demagogical use of social media, we're actually formed to want that and to vote for it and to desire it and to protect it and to fight for it. So democracy is a perfect vehicle for the errors of Russia, as long as you know how to use it well, as long as you have all the tools at your disposition. If you don't, then you just crack down hard and you're totalitarian, just kill who's in your way. But if you can do it nicely, do it nicely. Any link that binds woman to the family and the home, and her emancipation is proclaimed as a basic principle. She is withdrawn from the family and the care of her children, even if she wants to stay. to be thrust instead into public life and collective production under the same conditions as man. So that was, again, for example, equal wages for women. Again, we'd have to talk about this thoroughly and calmly and scientifically and in a scholarly fashion. I'm just kind of oversimplifying things here, just giving examples. So the fight for women to have equal wages was and is, in fact, again, not that it's intrinsically evil, but in this context, it was definitely a step exploited by communists for doing precisely that, thrusting women out of the home. Whereas before, you had to pay the one laborer, the one man, a wage that was sufficient for him to raise his family so that his wife didn't have to work outside the home. Introducing thrusting women into the workplace and making it obligatory to pay them the same wage made it possible to lower the wages of men, raise the wages of women, and make it possible to thrust both outside of the home. So now mom and dad have to work. Why? Because women and men earn equal wages. So one man's wage is usually not enough to support the family. Emancipation of women, isn't it great? You have to work, whether you like it or not. You have to have a job. You're emancipated. So it's really difficult now for a single income household to get by, especially to live up to the demands, the standard of living that's kind of being thrust upon us. So the care of home and children devolves upon the collectivity. Babysitters, daycare, public schools, all that is just a big babysitting machine. Finally, the right of education is denied to parents, for it is conceived as the exclusive prerogative of the community, in whose name and by whose mandate alone parents may exercise this right. Next, so parents have no innate right to educate their children. So you do mandatory public schools and curricula, the elimination of parents from children's decisions, and forcing adult decisions on children. For example, guess what? You're in preschool, you got to choose your gender, and your parents can't even know that we're posing you this question. They can't even know that you're making such a decision. They can't interfere in your decision to be a boy if you want to be a girl, if you're really a girl. Sexual education, sexual activity, euthanasia in Belgium, for just one example that comes to mind. In Belgium, it's minors, so children can make their own decisions about euthanasia. Parents can't get involved. So if you're 11 and you're really sad and you want to take your own life, well, your parents can stop you from that. So again, this is the emancipation of children. This is like, a dream world for kids. You eliminate parents from their children's decision and you force difficult, irreversible, life-changing adult decisions on children. Imagine having a so-called gender reassignment surgery at 4. That you understand the decision you're making. When you mutilate yourself at 4 years of age, and your parents can't even get involved. When you're, at 4 years of age, you want to be a firefighter today, a police officer tomorrow. You're going to let a kid make that decision. That's ridiculous. But violence may be used against families to accelerate this progress. This is all progress. So sexual education, sexual activity, Europe is usually far more ahead of us, usually, but America's catching up, so we should be proud. We're becoming more and more communist. The revolution is making progress here, comrades, be proud. Sexual education in Europe involves a lot of sexual activity as well. So children are actually being taught shown actions at a very early age. And America, again, is catching up. So again, this is all parents are kept out of these decisions. So again, public school is mandatory. In Europe, homeschooling is much more difficult to do. The curriculum is set. Your children have to go to school. You can't decide what they're going to participate in or not. You can't get involved in their decisions. It's their decision about their gender, their whatever, their orientation, their life. And violence may be used. So we can take your kids away if you're interfering in their decisions. Absolute equality. They don't need patriarchy. Children need freedom from oppression. Pius XI, communism is a system full of errors and sophisms. It is in opposition both to reason and to divine revelation. It subverts the social order because it means the destruction of its foundations, because it ignores the true origin and purpose of the state, because it denies the rights and dignity and liberty of human personality, and it'll eliminate, in whatever way is necessary, all those who protect the social order, who protect its foundation, who protect the family, who protect parents, who protect God and the order established by God, namely the church. Let's keep going here. I apologize for actually not got a lot to cover still. I'm sorry. Now, the names and tactics of communism. So here, all right, take a deep breath, all right? Take a deep breath. Try to regain some attention. Now, this is another point where if you were dozing, kind of wake up now. The names and tactics of communism. So here's, again, where we really need to be on our guards, because communism, again, can fly many different color flags, and it's still communism. So don't expect the hammer and sickle to be the warning sign that we're dealing with communism here. They fly many different color flags. So be on your guard. Pius XI again. What a hater pope, man. This guy, total hater, isn't he? In the beginning, communism showed itself for what it was in all its perversity, so Soviet communism. But very soon it realized that it was thus alienating the people. People don't like to spill too much blood over and over again, or to have their blood spilled. It has therefore changed its tactics and strives to entice the multitudes by trickery of various forms, hiding its real designs behind ideas that in themselves are good and attractive. Thus, aware of the universal desire for peace, for example, everybody wants peace. Would you not get behind peace? The leaders of communism pretend to be the most zealous promoters and propagandists in the movement for world amity and world peace. Yet at the same time, they stir up a class warfare which causes rivers of blood to flow. And realizing that their system offers no internal guarantee of peace, they have recourse to unlimited armaments. So they say, yes, we want peace. Of course, wouldn't you get behind? Do you want to be labeled as somebody that does not want peace? You don't want to be labeled that, do you? You don't want to be labeled that, do you? So get behind us, we want peace. How do you start peace? Well, here's your pallet of bricks, throw it through the windows of those people that own the shops. We're for peace. So that's the thing. And people usually are so short-sighted they don't even notice, or so browbeaten into compliance, they just go along with it. So you say, yes, we want peace, but an intrinsic element of communism is violent, dialectic, continuous class struggle. So yes, we want peace, but by means of a violent class struggle. So of course we're on board with peace, but we just got to kind of violently achieve it. Then we'll have peace. But they sell you peace. They're not going to sell you, class struggle down, kill the owners. No, we want peace. We want peace. Everybody wants peace. Under various names which do not suggest communism, they establish organizations and periodicals with the sole purpose of carrying their ideas into quarters otherwise inaccessible. They try perfidiously to worm their way even into professedly Catholic and religious organizations. They carry their hypocrisy so far as to encourage the belief that communism in countries where faith and culture are more strongly entrenched will assume another and much milder form. So yes, communism and Catholicism, they're perfectly compatible. Sure. Yeah. They'll use the Catholic Church in the class struggle, but when they're done, the Catholic Church has to be set aside. So what titles do they use very often? Again, women's rights, reproductive rights, family planning. Do you want to be labeled as being against women's rights? Do you want to be labeled as being against reproductive rights? Do you want to be labeled as being against family planning? Do you want any of those labels? Of course you don't. Get behind all these things. They're legitimate ways of promoting communist principles. Women's rights, get them out of the home. Reproductive rights, abortion, contraception, family planning, all of that. The one-child, two-child policy in China, that's family planning. Universal health care, social justice, all these things, yes. Racial equality, racial justice. Now we're in the midst of that continuously. BLM, we'll talk about that in just a second. Immigration reform, refugees, all of that. If you can use it to subvert the current social order, let's use it. Do they care about universal health care? No. Social justice? No. Racial equality? No. Racial justice? No. Immigration reform? No. Right? That's all. That's all chattel. I mean, like, immigrants, do they matter? No, of course not. You use them today when they're useful. You slaughter them tomorrow. It's the class struggle that matters. It's the revolution that matters. Do black people matter? No. White people matter? No. Nobody matters in a communist society. Individuals don't matter. LGBTQ+. Environmental justice, which is, by the way, green outside and red inside. It's like a watermelon. The environmental movement, when you think of that, it's a watermelon. It's got a thin green shell outside. Inside, it's all juicy red. It's all absolutely juicy red. Because it's precisely all about that. Take, this industrialization of the world. That's all evil, countries that are generating wealth. We must take that all away from them because they're ruining the environment. So these marketable titles, beware of them. Be very aware of them. Study what's behind them. The goals, again, some of them might be legitimate, but what means are they using for those goals? Are they using communist means? Are they using legitimate means? Is it even a legitimate goal? Says Pius XII, see to it, venerable brethren, he's speaking to bishops, that the faithful do not allow themselves to be deceived. Communism is intrinsically wrong, and no one who would save Christian civilization may collaborate with it in any undertaking whatsoever. Those who permit themselves to be deceived into lending their aid towards the triumph of communism in their own country will be the first to fall victims of their error. If you collaborate with communism, you'll be the first to fall as its victim. Just how it is. That's exactly how it is. You are useful for as long as you're useful, but when you're no longer useful, you're eliminated. Remember, the issue, Saul Alinsky, who was a major Marxist in American history, and a big infiltrator of the Catholic Church. This isn't like one of those stories like, behind this, he infiltrated. No. Like bishops were having him give talks to priests in the Chicago area in the 60s and 70s. He was in that sense an infiltrator of the Catholic Church by desire of the hierarchy of the church. He says one of the rules for radicals is that the issue is not the issue. So the issue is not so if the issue is women's rights, the issue is not the issue. The issue is what's behind the issue. Black Lives Matter, the issue is not the issue. Poverty, the issue is not the issue. Women's rights, the issue is not the issue. LGBTQ, the issue is not the issue. The issue are those errors behind it. Materialistic, atheistic, dialectic, violent class struggle. The removal of God and the total subversion or usurping of that order. The expropriation of any and all private property. Why? Because the state needs to take the place of God. Individuals and families must be deprived of that autonomy. The destruction of the sacredness of life, marriage, and the family. Those are the issues. They can wear many different masks for whatever, If you like Greek drama, I'll put on a mask for Greek drama. If you like Shakespearean comedy, I'll do that for you. But the issue is the goal behind the play. So, don't be deceived. Two examples. So this is the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Do not be deceived. Do not ever give a penny to the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. They have a pretty faithful track record of supporting organizations with communist agendas. It's an official entity within the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, but again, with a track record. So the way they work is they receive money from the faithful in the United States, and then they give grants to other organizations to promote social justice in the United States. The problem is that they are constantly supporting communist organizations, pro-abortion, pro-death, pro-revolution, pro-BLM, pro-all of this organization, constantly with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their excuse is the following. They say, well, no. we realize we're funding communist and pro-death, cultural death organization. We realize that. But we need to collaborate on what unites us. So we only collaborate on the goals that we share in common, on the values that we share in common. As a matter of principle, because as Pius XI says, don't be deceived. You cannot collaborate with communists in any way, shape, or form. Because if you collaborate with them, you will always be collaborating and spreading some communist error, always, without exception. You can't compartmentalize your collaboration. You will always be contributing to the spread of one of their errors, no matter what you collaborate with them on. An example, CCHD. So the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. They fund organizations that are Marxist, pursue Marxist goals with Marxist tactics, revolution, violence, abortion also, contraception, LGBTQ+. So their explanation to kind of calm people down and say everything's okay. We're only doing things that unite us here. We're not promoting abortion. We're not promoting revolution. We're not promoting killing of police officers. We're not promoting any of that. But in the end, it's either a deception that's inexcusable. If they are really that deceived, they shouldn't, like their parents even shouldn't give them allowance money. If they are just that deceived, they're just like totally incapable of administering those sums of money. Or if that's a lie, well then we shouldn't be giving them money because they are liars. So let's say, for example, I'm collaborating with this organization that promotes the killing of police officers, but I'm only collaborating with them on keeping the lawns of our city green. That's a good cause. You know, green lawns in New Bedford are kind of, they can make everybody feel happy or whatever. That's a gospel value, protecting the environment. So we only work on keeping the lawns nice and green. Yes, they're also in favor of killing police officers, but we don't collaborate on that. So when I give her the money, it's just use it only for keeping that lawn green. Okay. All right, you're going to do that? Okay, thank you. And even if that's true, even if Kathleen were to honor my request, what does that mean? That, first, she's going to keep that lawn green using communist propaganda. She's going to spread communist propaganda to keep that lawn green. She's going to be, hey, comrades, we need to keep this lawn green because the planet is first. We need to whatever. So she's going to do it, spreading communist propaganda. 2, if I give her $75,000 to keep that lawn green, she can use $75,000 of her own money to target police officers and to kill them, to buy pallets of bricks, guns, weapons, to kill innocent police officers, or to fund contraception. It frees their own money for their own iniquitous ends. That's why we can never collaborate, ever, for any reason. You're always going to be supporting some evil. Evil so fundamentally evil that you cannot have anything to do with it. Does that make sense, kind of? Right? So that's their defense. No. We don't collaborate on abortion and revolution and any of these things. Yes, we support these organizations, but only insofar as we work on shared values. Baloney, again. Another one, BLM, Black Lives Matter. Don't Black Lives Matter? Of course they do, but that's not what BLM is about at all. Not at all. Black lives don't matter to Black Lives Matter, the organization. Again, they kill blacks and whites alike. If you don't share their agenda, you're a victim of their revolution just like anybody else, whether you're white or black. In communist dialectic, no lives matter. Black or white, no lives matter. Look at that. Oh man, that's all communist. They're all commies. So work for racial justice, work for social justice have nothing to do with these organizations though, nothing whatsoever. BLM, just to show you that what they're about, what we believe from their own website. We commit to healing ourselves and each other, co-creating alongside comrades, allies, and family a culture where each person feels seen, heard, and supported. So comrades, okay, these are communists. We intentionally build and nurture a beloved community, that is bonded together through a beautiful struggle that is restorative, not depleting. A beautiful community, where we all struggle together and against each other, So don't take it personally if I throw a brick through your window tomorrow. I'm building a beautiful community, all right? Don't worry, don't take it personally. We are guided by the fact that all Black lives matter, regardless of actual or perceived sexual identity, gender expression, economic status, ability, disability, religious beliefs or disbeliefs. We make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. We are self-reflexive and do the work required and dismantle cisgender privilege. Cisgender means like that you're trapped in the binary division of male and female. So we dismantle that privilege, you know? If you're a biological male, you have a privilege that I must dismantle. The fact that you identify with your biological sex gives you a privilege that I don't have because I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. I must dismantle that privilege. You can't be any more privileged than I am. We are all absolutely equal. We uplift especially black trans folk, especially black trans women, who continue to be disproportionately impacted by trans antagonistic violence. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their context. We make our spaces family friendly. Like here, we're family friendly. How do we do that? We dismantle patriarchal practice that requires mothers to work double shifts so that they can mother in private even as they participate in public justice work. So mothers shouldn't have to have that burden imposed on them and having to take care of a family, having to take care of kids. We dismantle that structure where it's the mom's job to take care of her kids. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family, mom, dad, and kids. We instead create a family-friendly atmosphere, extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children feel comfortable. Family-friendly. If your parents don't want to take care of you, too bad, family-friendly. If your parents just want to be doing drugs and overdosing, they don't want to take care of you, that's family-friendly. If the state wants to take kids away from their parents, that's family-friendly. If the state says you should be raised by two gay guys, that's family-friendly. Isn't that great? We all work together for a great community. Don't you want to be a part of the struggle? Man, I'm excited. We foster a queer affirming network. When we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking, or rather the belief that all in the world are heterosexual unless he or she disclose otherwise. That's an erroneous presumption. We cultivate an intergenerational communal network free from ageism. So that the fact that age matters. We believe that all people, regardless of age, show up with the capacity to lead and learn. So again, with the kids, you force on them decisions that are beyond their age level. All right, we got to wrap this up. So again, I already said enough about this. So few have been able to grasp the nature of communism. The majority instead succumb to its deception, skillfully concealed by the most extravagant promises. All of these lies, behind them is communist principles. Why did these errors spread? So how did these errors spread? If what I say is done, Our Lady said. If what I say is done. Pray the rosary every day. Well, do you pray the rosary every day? How many Catholics that you know pray the rosary every day? How many people in your parish pray the rosary every day? How many people in this diocese pray the rosary every day? How many Catholics in the United States pray the rosary every day? If what I say is done, we will have peace. If not, the errors of Russia will spread. Do not offend the Lord God anymore. He's already too much offended. Do you avoid all deliberate sin, mortal or venial deliberate sin? Do you do that? Your MIM members, your third order members, do you do that? What about the rest of Catholics? All deliberate sin, mortal or venial. St. John Paul II says, well, it doesn't seem so. Sin has been granted citizenship in the world. That's very often what we do. Here's your passport. You have access. Gluttony, well, on Sundays, oh man, Sundays I have a right to be gluttonous, Mondays I have a right to be angry at my coworkers. Tuesdays I get to complain about my wife. Wednesdays, so there's a citizenship, every day there's some deliberate sin I get to commit. All right? Examine yourselves, of course, me, too. Make sacrifices for sinners, for many souls are going to hell because there is none to sacrifice themselves and pray for them. Do you offer any sacrifices for sinners? Any, whatsoever. Do you pray for them? Will these errors continue to spread? Yes. Wherever what Our Lady asked for is not done, they will spread. They'll infect individuals, families, parishes, dioceses, cities, nations. All these will be infected. If you don't do what Our Lady asked for, you will be infected. Your family, your extended family, whatever. The MIM, if we are unfaithful to what Our Lady asked for, we'll be communists sooner or later. If we're not doing Catholic apostolate, we'll look for something else to do. We'll be outside protesting for social justice, like many other Catholic organizations are doing. The Catholic who does not live really and sincerely according to the faith will be swept away defenseless in this new deluge which threatens the world. There are too many who fulfill more or less faithfully the more essential obligations of the religion they boast of professing, but they have no desire of knowing it better or of deepening their inward conviction, and still less of bringing into conformity with the external gloss the inner splendor of a right and unsullied conscience that recognizes and performs all its duties under the eye of God. So if we're external Catholics, but not internal, it's not enough. If we don't have a desire of knowing our faith better, of deepening our inward conviction, still less of bringing into conformity with the external gloss the inner splendor, we will be swept away. And thus, the Catholic who lives this way, who does not really live sincerely according to the faith, is preparing his own ruin. He is exposing to ridicule the very name of Christian. The evil which today torments humanity can be conquered only by a worldwide crusade of prayer and penance, which is what Our Lady asked for, by the way. That Christians implore also the powerful intercession of the Immaculate Virgin, who, having crushed the head of the serpent of old, remains the sure protectress and invincible help of Christians. Against this deluge, there's only one safe refuge, the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Against the deluge of communism and its errors, if we want to be free from the errors of communism, which doesn't mean like, oh man, I'm going to be waving a Soviet flag pretty soon. No, it's much more subtle than this. Much more subtle. Like, the devil and even the communists know it's going to be pretty hard to get a Soviet flag in our hands. So if we prefer a green flag, wave a green flag. An LGBTQ rainbow flag, wave that. Social justice, environmental justice, if you prefer that, sustainable development goals, okay, wave that flag as long as the errors behind it are the same. Unless we are living in the Immaculate Heart of Mary as our refuge, we will be swept away. And we'll be promoting these errors without even knowing it. Or worse, knowing it. Brothers and sisters, I thank you for your time. Be consoled. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph, but only those will share the triumph who are in that Immaculate Heart, who pray the Rosary, who avoid sin, who make sacrifices for sinners, who live on the side of Our Lady who crushes the head of the serpent. All right, thank you so very much.